Welcome to the Misophonia Podcast. This is the first episode of Season 3. My name is Adil Ahmad, and I still have misophonia. This episode is with John Smoot. John's the guy I met at the Misophonia Convention a couple years ago, and again last year. And I chose John to kick off this season because the 2020 convention is virtual, and it's actually this weekend, starting on, I believe, Thursday night, and it goes through Saturday. I'll be speaking on Saturday on what I've learned doing the podcast about community, about misophonia, and I wanted to kick it off with John. He's a passionate advocate, and he actually runs a number of the online groups, and he's here to talk about that, but also his origin story and some other interesting tidbits from his life. He's had miso for a while, and he's got stories going back to the 80s. I mentioned the convention. That's, again, this weekend. I don't know. I'm sure you can still get access to it. I've had a number of past guests and listeners say that they'll be on listening to my talk on Saturday, so that should be fun. And I just want to say there are still a bunch of slots available for interviews for this season. They've been filling up quickly, but there are still some available, and I'd love to talk to you. The interviews I've done so far have been amazing. There's some really cool stuff coming up. People from all over the world, again, of course, and I've got some of the leading advocates, professional comedian who talks about misophonia, and yeah, it's just amazing. Can't wait to bring these to you starting, continuing next week. And another thing I'm going to be experimenting this season is actually written interviews through DMs and chats and emails. So if you're interested in that, please give me an email at hello@misophoniapodcast.com, or you can just contact through the Instagram or Facebook at Misophonia Podcast, or even on Twitter at Misophonia Show. All right, well, without further ado, here's my interview with John. John, welcome. Good to have you finally on the podcast.
Thank you. Good to finally be here.
John, I met at, your listeners know probably by now, I met you a couple years ago, a couple conventions ago. And we're relatively in touch on social media, trying to get community growing for me. So good to have you here. Obviously, as a listener, you kind of know I like to kind of find out roughly where people are located. And tell me about you.
Well, I'm in the Los Angeles area, and currently I don't leave the house because we're under complete lockdown right now. This is on the, I don't know, depending on how things go, the tail end or the middle portion of the whole coronavirus pandemic, and the protests and also, unfortunately, counterproductive looting and terrorizing that is going on out there. So they've got most of California on lockdown, I believe.
Yeah, so interesting times. We'll probably get into some of that, like how is it during, work from home and all that stuff, or just being at home, put it that way. But so what? I haven't heard, or maybe I don't remember too much of your kind of life story. Do you want to just roughly talk about kind of like around when this started for you, and what you kind of remember from back in the day?
The origin story of the Smooter. Sorry, that's my nickname. Started to develop the miso triggers very gradually, somewhere between the ages of 15 and 17, which was a long time ago because I'm in my very early 50s right now. So it was the mid 80s, and I just started to think people were really rude, with bad eating manners and stuff. But I did notice that it started to bug me more than it should have, and bug me to the point where I could actually kind of feel it, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah.
And actually, just to jump ahead several years now that things are more developed with my miso and also with hopefully my maturity, at least a little bit, my miso triggers, the way they affect me, because they're not the same for everybody, but it's kind of like that hangover you get, not the hangover itself, but the sensitivity that comes with it. So imagine you're laying in a bed and you've got a massive hangover or a massive migraine, so that the non-drinkers can relate. And the curtains have been opened and someone comes in with a metal pan and they're beating on it with a wooden spoon. Something like that. That's what my triggers are. And I kind of noticed that starting to grow, where it's like, this doesn't make sense for me to feel this hurt by people chewing with their mouth open or popping their bubble gum, which, by the way, I used to do pretty well myself. And I had a neat trick I won't get into for hiding my gum when the teachers would catch me chewing it in class to where they couldn't find it, and they'd walk around feeling stupid afterwards because they would turn their back and I'd start chewing my gum in front of the class again. So maybe misophonia was a payback, being a class clown.
Clearly it was.
Yeah. So eventually this got so bad over the course of, a few years on into my 20s where I just couldn't even chew gum anymore. It wasn't just that other people were rude about it and it bothered me. I couldn't chew it. And, I didn't self-trigger, but I just felt like such a hypocrite. It's just one of those things that got progressively worse. And then eventually more sounds started to come into the picture. And one fairly graphic instance I'll share with you. A lot of it really is rooted in the gum. It's gone so far beyond that now, but a lot of it's rooted in that. And back at a job I had in the early 2000s, right around the time misophonia was getting its name, there was a girl I sat next to at work. I mean, we were very close physically, our desks and our chairs, and she chewed gum like a cow. Trigger alert out there, just in case. She chewed gum like a cow, and I could usually kind of put up with a little bit, but it was getting more difficult. And one day she was just going nuts, and I asked her to stop, and she just said, "You're so stupid, John." And I'm like, okay, she thinks this is a big joke, but it's not. And then I started to feel nauseous, and I went in the bathroom and I threw up. And then I had to go home sick the rest of the day. And I didn't know what this was. Misophonia was getting its name around that time, but I still wasn't going to know for like another 15 years. And I just felt so, what's the word? Weak. I can't put it any other way. Very weak. It's like, how does a guy throw up because a girl has got bad manners? And I did make up my mind at that point, whatever this is. I just used to tell people it was some weird personality flaw I couldn't get past. But whatever this is, never again will I let it push me to that point. So, we call it fight or flight. For the most part, I'm pretty much flight. I don't want to fight with anybody. And I never did let it get to that point again, thank God. And then years later, a boss who I'm still close to and friends with on Facebook found an article on misophonia, and she posted it apparently thinking of me, but forgot to tag me in it. And my wife happened to see it, so she tagged me in it, and my boss said, "Oh yeah, that's exactly who I was thinking of when I posted it." And I saw it on my page. My wife hadn't told me what, I don't know if I didn't talk to her yet that day or what, but I saw it on my page that I'd been tagged in this article. It said something like, "Do you hate the sound of slurping?" Which, like I said, by then there were other noises besides the gum chewing and the popping and whatnot. And I thought, okay, this is just some kind of joke that my ex-boss and my wife were playing on me. And I opened it up and I read it, and I could feel my mouth, my jaw drop to the floor. And I, not quite, but was almost in tears by the time I was done reading it. And I'm like, Pardon my French, but who the F gave authorization to write my biography?
Right. Yeah.
And right after that, I started looking stuff up on my own, found the Misophonia Association, and started looking at the we used to call them boards. What are they called now? Group pages?
Yeah, like forums and
that sort of thing. And a lot of it was Misophonia Association. And this was in 2016 when this all happened. And I was really looking forward to this conference and waiting for the dates. And for those of you out there in radio or podcast land who don't know, the 2016 conference actually became the 2017 conference because they had to reschedule it. So I had to wait like another 6 months to go to Vegas. And there's kind of an irony in that, because I guess some people didn't want to go to Vegas because they were afraid to be triggered by the noises of slot machines and coins there. But that didn't bother me at all. I love Vegas, and as far as my triggers go, there's nothing in Vegas that's going to trigger me that I can't get anywhere else in, LA or Tennessee or wherever I may be. So I was okay with that. And I went, and I felt like I'd found a long lost family, because here's a bunch of people like me that were, many of them sitting around thinking they were crazy while I was sitting around thinking I was crazy. None of us were crazy, although this is driving us crazy. And it was a great weekend. And or a couple of days through into the weekend, and I've gone to everyone since so far. That
Yeah,
was a long
and
story, wasn't it? I just took you through
no,
30 years of my life.
yeah,
Oh, over 30 years.
yeah, that's great. No, you summed it up well there, and yeah, it's interesting. You so after that, that's one of the first or one of the rare kind of physical responses that I've heard about of somebody actually having to run to the bathroom to throw up. We bottle stuff up inside. I haven't heard that often of somebody actually like having a that kind of physical reaction. And after that, you said that you swore that you were not going to get to that point again, and you were going to use flight as your kind of mechanism. How did you do that? Like, were there? Did you literally just leave every time you heard something, or how did that go? And did you ever lapse? And
I think a lot of it was automatic. I mean, really, I guess I did a lot of explaining in my summarization there of my life history. Um, I did say never mind. I don't think I consciously at that, or excuse me, never again. I did say never again. I don't think at that point I consciously said I'm going to run away and not beat people up or risk getting beat up, whatever. I think that just getting away became my automatic response, and then once I knew what misophonia was and started talking to other people in the miso families, I put it, such as yourself, and reading things, I think I just kind of came up with the realization I don't want to hurt anybody. And that's kind of one of my pet peeves. There's a lot of great articles out there about misophonia, and I know that everybody's well meaning, but I'm getting a little concerned because we need to grow the awareness of it, and I see that happening. But I think with that, there's misconceptions going on out there, being promoted unintentionally, I'm sure. Like the picture of the girl covering her ears and squinting. That's that's not how everybody reacts. Some people just leave, uh, and we're not like that all the time. And I'm worried that someone's thinking, that, oh my gosh, if I chew my gum in front of a mesophone, they're going to go ballistic and mutilate me or something. And that's not the kind of thing I want out there. And I hear people talking about fight or flight, and I just kind of really only realized that maybe a few years ago that I'm probably more of a flight person. I can't say I've never had somewhat violent thoughts about this, what the triggers do to me, but never really extreme, never serious, never anything I wanted to act upon, even on my worst agitator. I prefer just to get away.
yeah, and you're right. I mean, I hear about a lot of the violent thoughts, but it's almost never that I hear about somebody acting on it. It pretty much ends up being glares and or leaving. Um, and in the in that period when you realized something was wrong until you heard about me. So were you maybe subconsciously doing things like wearing your earbuds a lot, or I don't know, did you have any coping mechanisms during those years when you weren't sure what it was or didn't think there was anything special?
This is where I have to admit a lack of intelligence on my part. Um, at the first conference, I met a gentleman that some of you have probably seen in a movie called Quiet Please, or through other mediums. He's a musician named Paul Tabachnik,
Mm-hmm.
and he carries around musicians' headphones, or earplugs rather. And he turned me onto those, and I didn't know he was wearing them, which was kind of the selling point for him. He's like, "Yeah, you didn't know I had them in there, right?" I'm like, "Oh, when I get back, I'm gonna order some of those and try that." And I got the same ones he was getting. They were the Heroes musicians earplugs, if anyone's looking for them. And I would recommend them if they work for you. I actually have moved on to some others that worked a little better for me personally, and totally forgot where I was going with that, dude.
Oh yeah, I was just talking about yeah. So we in your life story, I was kind of diving into like that period before you knew it was me. So, but you knew something was up. Like, what kind of coping mechanisms did you have? And
Oh yeah.
then you start to talk about
Okay.
how you have very very low intelligence, and
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's right. So I get back and I start using these earplugs, and I start remembering I love to go to the movies. I don't do it much anymore for
yeah,
the obvious miso reasons.
right.
But before it really escalated, I was the guy that would go to see a movie that I thought was going to suck just so I could be in a movie theater. That's how much I enjoyed going back
Mm,
when I could go. And as the thing started to progress, and this is a great example, in movie theaters, I would grab a bunch of napkins when I buy my popcorn that, of course, I could eat and no one else in the theater could. And I would stuff my ears full of itty bitty napkin pieces to try to block out the sounds of others who were eating their popcorn. And so here it is, years later, I finally know what this is, but how on earth did I not figure out that maybe if I tried shoving some earplugs in my ears, I'd be a little less miserable.
Yeah,
So
wow. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess,
that was less intelligent.
I mean, I know a lot of people were hearing about it recently. They're Googling for it, but back in the day, you couldn't really necessarily, like in the 90s, you know, these search engines weren't around. You couldn't just Google like, you know, want to tear my ears out or sound sensitivity and then find this stuff.
Right.
So, yeah, you do what you got to do. Shove paper in your ears or what have you. Okay, interesting. So, yeah, totally DIY MacGyver solutions you were doing, and then you were given this article, and you said you know almost broke down in tears, probably like a lot
Almost.
of us. Yeah,
Almost.
of course not. Yeah, almost. So and it did and did your yeah. So what was it like after that? Did you immediately start to get new coping mechanisms, or I don't know? Did you start telling everybody about it? Like how's your reaction?
Well, once I was over feeling like an idiot for something I should have figured out on my own 25 years or so
No, I
earlier.
mean yeah. It's hard. I mean, how are you gonna figure it out? It seems so weird when you explain to somebody. But continue. Yeah, sorry.
No, that's okay. I hate to admit this, and you're going to edit this out. At least I hope you are. I forgot the question. 2 times I've woke up in the middle of the conversation. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, it's all good. I think I was asking. Oh yeah. So you found out what it was. How did your life change?
Okay. I'm going to be really honest here. My life changed mostly for the better, but not entirely. And I think that's just part of misophonia, and we have to deal with it. And those who may hear this and are new maybe need to know this ahead of time. At first, my thought was, I'm not crazy, at least not for this reason, you know. And so that gave me the warm fuzzies. You know, I felt great. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a reason I'm like this. I actually was in leadership at a job at the time, and we had a meeting, and I told my bosses I was going to do this. I was going to announce why. Pardon me. I said, I'm going to tell some of you why I'm such an asshole sometimes. And in the meeting, I explained misophonia. And at that point, I'd only known about it for a month, but I'd done a lot of reading and, you know, at that point, self-diagnosed. And that was great to be able to come out. I mean, I didn't want to, I'm not normally someone that likes to show all of his dirty laundry, but I felt like that was something that I needed to share for my own sanity. So it's something that I don't hide, but I don't always broadcast, pardon the pun. So that part of it was great, and getting the support of my family members, some of whom used to trigger me when I was younger and became my biggest supporters before I even knew what muso was. They're like, oh, something's up with John and he can't help it. I got to be cool about this around him. And when they found out, nothing but love. That'll bring you to tears, in a good way. But the downside was at some point I started to notice that I was becoming more sensitive. It actually was kind of after the first conference. And while I was at that conference, I had tried to make a list of my triggers, and I just started thinking and realized there were things that were bugging me so lightly that maybe it was on a near subconscious level, and I didn't really realize it until I was looking for it. And I'm making this list that I thought was going to be 3 or 4 things, and it wound up being like a page and a half. And it was everything from, you know, potato chips to kissing noises in a movie. And unfortunately, a lot of the triggers have grown just in the last 4 years, and others seem to have come out in the last 4 years and developed. And I think that probably is the downside of knowing this, is you become more aware to what's gradually going to happen anyway, I guess. The inevitable comes a lot faster because now you're aware that it's coming.
And I wonder if that's because, you know how stress really makes this worse for us. And I wonder if just being conscious of it, you know, I get more stressed out because when am I going to get triggered again? And maybe that's a feedback loop.
Yeah, maybe. There was a study done right around the time I went to the first conference, or I shouldn't say it, it makes it sound like I really know what I'm talking about. I read somewhere that there was a study going on in Australia and or New Zealand.
Dr. John Smoot here.
Dr. John
I'm
Smoot.
just kidding. I'm just kidding. You said
Damn it.
you're like a real expert here, but yeah, continue.
You gave away my secret identity. The study that I was reading about, probably on Facebook, which is where I seem to do most of my reading outside of work now, saying there's a study being done in either Australia and or New Zealand that people talking about triggers with other mesophones talking about the triggers with other mesophones are causing those mesophones to develop the same triggers. And not long after this is when I started to kind of notice my own sensitivity, even after the first conference. And I posted something about that to some people I'd met on at the conference and on Facebook. And some of them did say that, yeah, in certain situations, they find themselves more sensitive afterwards. So there's the downside. I think maybe awareness of it makes you, this will sound intelligent, more aware of it, maybe more aware of triggers that you might not have noticed until they had a lot more time to grow, therefore making them grow faster. I didn't realize how much the sound of the ruffling of cellophane or potato chip bag bothers me until 2016. Now it bothers me a lot more. As a kid, I love to see people making out or whatever on television and movies because I was a kid, and kids, right or wrong, like to see those kind of crazy things the grown-ups are doing, And now if that's on, I usually have to mute it, at least, because I certainly can't stand to hear it anymore.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, maybe like a double-edged sword, like knowing about it can make you more aware of it. And that, like I said before, like maybe a feedback loop there. And
well, maybe whoever coined the phrase "ignorance is bliss" was a mesophone.
Wise questions from Dr. John Smoot there. You're right. You're right. Philosopher, Dr. John Smoot. I want to go back to, you had a lot, you were saying a lot earlier. There's a lot to unpack there about a month after you found out what it was, you went to your coworkers, right? Is that what you're talking about there?
Roughly a month, as far as I can remember, yeah.
So, I want to hear
in a department meeting.
Right, yeah. So I want to hear about like what, so before that, what, how were you treating or what was the interaction with your coworkers when they were triggering you?
Good question. And this goes, of course, over as far as actually telling people at work about it, goes all the way back to at least the early 90s. I think maybe the first time I said something along those lines without knowing really what I was talking about, it would probably been around 92. And it would usually be something like, look, it's not you, it's me. I don't understand it myself. I just got this weird personality flaw. And could you just maybe please chew with your mouth closed? It's painful, man. It's just really painful. I know you don't mean to, but could you just maybe do that for me? I'm not asking you to spit your gum out or whatever. And then around 98, 99, I shared an office with two women, and one of them was in love with Subway. And don't get me wrong, I love Subway. I'm not about to slam Subway here, but she would come in just about every day with a Subway sandwich. And she would eat that thing and make noises that I've never heard anyone else make. And they weren't loud, but I could hear them, and it was painful. And back then, not to get any employers in trouble or anything, because this was all me, I tend to work without taking lunch a lot, because that's just how I am, at least when I have that kind of flexibility, legal or not. And this was a job where, I just did it, work through. I'd go in there at 8 in the morning and I'd work till 6 or 7 at night sometimes, just smoking a cigarette if I needed to, because back then I did smoke, I don't now, or getting a snack or whatever, but not taking just a lunch hour. And there were many a day when I took a lunch hour that I hadn't actually planned to take, because she was taking her lunch hour at her desk and killing me. So I finally talked to her about that, and I put it off as long as I could, because she was a sweet lady, and I knew she was really sensitive, and I think I might have made her cry. So more guilt for me. But that was basically the same speech I would try to give anyone I had to at work or otherwise. It's not you, it's me. Please accommodate me, or I'm going to die, kind of thing. So now I just get to say, the truth. And it makes a little more sense. And it's a truth that I know some people might be embarrassed to share, but let me tell you something. It's a lot easier to tell somebody, hey, I've got this neurological condition, and that noise you're making, I know you don't mean to, but it kind of aggravates it. as opposed to, look, I don't know what's wrong with me, but could you just shut your mouth?
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Um, yeah. So yeah, I mean, a lot of it's amazing. Yeah. I mean, you handled it, I guess, in the '90s in the same kind of way a lot of us handle it now. Relatively mature way. I'm impressed. And then after you, yeah. So and after you told your department, did you get different reactions from people? Like how was it? How was it after that? Were there any kind of awkward interactions with people afterwards? Did relationships change?
Yeah, I'm actually still with that same company right now, and I had been for several years at that point, and so I'd gotten to know people pretty much as well as you could with the work family, and they all knew I had this issue. And there's one gentleman in particular who can pop gum like a cow, but when it comes to this, he's one of my best friends. I explained it to him, and he went out of his way not to make those noises around me. He's also a pen clicker. One, two clicks
Yeah.
makes sense, but when you're doing the repetitive thing, I
Yeah.
can feel it like a fireworks in my skull.
Yep.
And he's a guy, he'll make fun of me for it, but we banter back and forth. Let me tell you something. You got to be able to laugh at this if you're going to live through it.
Yeah, it's come
And I
up,
can
man.
laugh at it.
Humor. Yeah, humor has come
The
up as a
best
coping
medicine.
mechanism. Yeah. Yeah. That's
Right. And everyone thinks misophones have great hearing. I subscribe to the other theory. We don't necessarily have great hearing. We have great radar for the things that bother us. So he would be across the room from me, and if he would open his mouth chewing his gum, I might call him on the phone from across the room and say, "Hey," he'll go, "Yeah, yeah, whatever. Okay, I'm sorry," and he'll stop. But then he'll yell out something to me, and I'll go, "What?" And he'll go, "How is it you can't hear me yelling out to you, but you can hear me chewing gum all the way over there?" And I'll say, "Well, I can hear you. I just can't understand you." Same thing, you know. But that's our relationship. We get along. He is one of the people I really respect because and there's others too, but he's just a good example of people who've really gone out of their way to accommodate me on that, even without orders from HR or anything. Um, but there is one guy in particular that I've known since day one there, and he thinks he's funny when he's not, and he should be really glad I'm not naming him here. We're in the meeting where I explain that, and he starts, "Oh, you mean like this?" and starts clicking his pen in front of everybody.
yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Dude, don't make me sock you in front of the entire department." And then another time, it was later in the day. I kind of put myself at risk here there because I realized I outranked him, and it could look like I was the harasser, which is not what I meant. But he's diabetic. I hope we don't have to edit this part out because I'm not trying to offend diabetics. My grandmother died from diabetes, but he is diabetic, and he was making that noise on purpose to bug me one day. And it was the end of a long day, and I was probably a little on edge. And I got up and I walked back to him, and one would say, "God in his face." I don't think that's really what I did, but I did get awful close. And I said, "Do you think that's funny?" He goes, "Well, yeah, I'm sorry if you can't take a joke." I said, "No, seriously, you think that's funny? You're trying to irritate me with something really hurts me, and you think it's funny? You're a diabetic, right?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "How about I shove a Hershey bar down your throat? See how that works for you." And we didn't talk again for a while after that.
But you're still working with the guy. I mean, you've been working at this company for a while. It's an amazing thing.
Well,
You
we
stuck
work
it
at
out.
home now too,
Oh, right. Yeah.
and we're in the same department, but we haven't worked in the same room in about 2 years.
Yeah.
He's got his good points too, but he's one of the people that when it comes to something like that, he doesn't know the boundaries.
Right. Yep. We've all run into some of
And
those. Yeah.
and now that you mention it, and I'm not going to get into the entire work relationship. He and I actually used to be really close work wise before all this, and that certainly put a big dent in that. And we're not really close work wise now, and it's in part because of some things he did to aggravate my misophonia in recent years. Um, Whether he meant to or not, I honestly don't think he was really meaning to until he found out it was bothering me. And there's
Right.
other aspects of his personality. So yeah, it's a good thing we don't work together. Maybe it's bad chemistry.
Right. Well, I mean, speaking of, like, you said you're working from home. You've been working from home for a couple years now, or just since this whole COVID thing?
Just since COVID started, I was actually very much against that because I thought I knew myself years ago, and said I could not work at home because I'd be too distracted. But now I have a family and other things going on in my life that kind of started lately, made me think it might not be so bad if I could work at home, and I'm probably mature enough to do it without, goofing off.
Right.
And then COVID happened, and I thought, well, here's my chance to find out. And yeah, I feel much better off with my overall situation. I don't believe my productivity has gone down. Misophonia wise, I'm much more at peace. And that's not to say that there's not an occasional noise here that can do something, like when, my daughter is eating her breakfast or lunch and doing what I refer to as bowl banging. And I know she doesn't mean to, but I can shut a door and that's the end of that. At work, you don't know who's going to come around the corner or what the guy in the next cubicle is going to be doing. So it's done wonders for my misophonia, just not having to go to the office. I know a lot of people are feeling a benefit of it for one reason or another. That's one of my main reasons. There's other people who want to go back to the office. I'm kind of hoping they leave me here when this is over. I'm hoping they find this was, what's the word I'm looking for? A cost-effective measure, kind of a forced test that worked out.
Yeah.
And maybe they'll just let me continue working from here for however much longer I may be working for them. That would be great. And I feel kind of bad because I know some people are miserable, and I'm actually, enjoying the lockdown for the most part in a situation that's, not a good situation. Look at it that way. I don't think I should be enjoying it.
Right. But and I'm looking at you. I'm looking at you now because you got the video one. And speaking of tools, you got the new Pod Pros, the AirPod Pros. And you're talking about the Hero earphones before. Do you want to the musician headphones or earbuds or whatever it is? Do you want to talk about like some of the pros and cons of some of these earphones that you've used over the years?
Originally, as I said, I did use the Heroes musicians earbuds, and those were great. They have a filter in them to let some noise in because the musician needs to be able to hear something. And I think after a while, it's just that I needed a little more resistance to outside noise when I'm wearing them. So they just go right into your ear, and I don't see anything indicating a size. I don't remember specifying a size, but on Amazon, I shudder to say the name of the brand. I just looked it up to make sure. Askilt. Not spelled the way you think, but that's how I'd pronounce it. It's Askilt. Askilt earplugs. So you can stick the Askilt in your ears and you'll feel better about your miso. Askilt for the Scotsman who's wearing nothing underneath. No. So these, they're just like a rubbery silicone kind of material. They sell them a couple of different ways, but the way I usually order them is a pack of 2 sets. They come in a little case, and one of them is yellow and one of them is clear. Sometimes one of them is white. The clear is obviously the least conspicuous for if you're going to be out in public. The yellow is something that I would maybe, just if I needed to wear earplugs while I'm sleeping, which occasionally I do, then I wear those. But I would recommend these. I would also recommend the Heroes that I was originally using, because we don't all need the same thing, and I thought those are great. And then for the ultimate in jamming your ears up, I used to order skull screws quite a bit, and I would actually go back and forth between those and the Heroes until I found this is the ones I use now is more of a common ground between the two. But skull screws will make you almost deaf, and the reason they call them skull screws is you put them in your ear and you actually twist them in,
and then they kind of expand or something. Or
I guess.
Yeah.
They just form fit really well. They're not that conspicuous, though, I got to tell you. They don't make them in clear. They're this big gray thing.
Yeah.
But if you're more concerned about what you're hearing than how you look, you can't go wrong with that, right?
Yeah, of course.
And then I'm wearing the iPad Pros, if I could talk about those for a second.
Yes,
give
please
Apple
do.
a plug, even though they're not paying me, and I wish they would, because they could certainly afford me. I bought the original Apple AirPods because my wife wanted a pair, and I bought them for her, and I thought, well, I can't, not get a pair for myself. Might help with my miso, and plus I'm the tech guy, and I want a new toy. So I bought us each a pair, and I had problems with those because I couldn't get them to stay in my ears. And apparently I have ear holes the size of Coke bottles, I guess. So I would buy, accessories that third parties sold on Amazon. I bought probably 5 or more different ones to try out to make them fit, and most or all of them, you couldn't put them in their little charger. And folks, if you don't know what I'm talking about, you're going to have to look this up, but it's not hard to find on Google or on the Apple Store or anything. That's Apple AirPods. That's the original version, and I recommend those if you can make them fit in your ears. But the accessories, if you have to use those, they're not going to be able to charge within their little charger, and that's one of the bonuses of having them. So I used those for a while, and then I went to, actually, I think the conference where I met you, Adil, and I had them with me, and then I think it was that one. And then when I got back, and this is like over the course of like 3 months, they announced the AirPods Pro. And I said, are you kidding me? Because I'm looking at it, and it says it comes with 3 things to make it fit in your ears. It has this awesome noise canceling feature. So I went ahead and bought those, and those are the ones I've worn ever since. I keep the old ones around, for going back to the gym, which I may do someday. But the AirPods Pro, much better. They have the noise canceling feature that works really well. As I said, they give you 3 choices of ear attachments so that they can fit in your ears, which the originals did not do. And they also have another feature called transparency that I really like, especially if I'm working in an office environment, because I can wear those and I can listen to music, or honestly, I'm mostly using the podcast. And I can kind of balance it out with the sound around me, so that if someone walks up to me and I need to have a conversation, I can.
So what does that mean? I've heard about the transparency mode. Does that duck down the music, or does that increase the voice, or does it do something with the frequencies where it ducks out the middle of the frequencies of the music so that the voice can go through? How does that work?
As far as I can tell with my naked ear, it doesn't do anything to the music or whatever sound is coming out of the headphones directly. What it does, if you think of it in 3 levels, this is how I look at it. You put in earphones and you're listening to music or not, whatever, it's going to block out the sound around you, right? And so you've got the noise canceling, which will block that out even more to some degree, completely, depending on how loud those noises are. Then you got the middle ground, which would be just to play the music, right? And then the next level is it actually amplifies the noises around you, but blends it in with whatever you're listening to. And so how much that helps or hurt you would, I guess, depend on how high you turn up the volume of what you're listening to.
Gotcha. Okay, so it doesn't change the volume of what you're listening to, but it cranks up what's around you if somebody's speaking to you.
Right. So you'd hear them better than just if you just had your earphones in.
Does it feel very loud though? Because now you've got the music and then okay, cool.
For me. Now now that you mentioned, I've never tested it out to see if lowering the volume on the music.
Well, if I'm listening to music really loud and then somebody comes to talk to me, is it going to then raise their voice so loud that the combined?
Well, no.
Okay.
No, you would have to turn the music down, but you wouldn't have to turn it down as low as you would if you had noise canceling on, or if you just didn't have the transparency function on. So you could still keep your music going if you wanted to, just at a very low volume.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting.
So, and ironically, sorry.
And I was going to say, in terms of controls, you don't have to basically take them out of your ears, right? You can do whatever you want, next skip tracks and all that stuff. They're kind of like.
If you want, it takes some getting used to, but you can program you've got 2 ways that you work them. So you can see here. So if I'm listening to music or want to answer a call, then I do a quick squeeze. If I want to turn on, and this is because I've set it up this way, if I want to turn on one of those other features, the noise canceling or the noise transparency, or cycle through between the 2, then I squeeze it and just hold it till it gets where I want to go. But that's where you can change it. I have it set where I can do that with both of my AirPods because that's what I need. But if you program it for your iPhone, if you can use those functions to instead cycle to the next track or other options. I can't remember what they are now because I've had them this way for so long. But I prefer to just be able to reach into either ear and turn off the noise transparency or turn it on, or noise canceling as needed.
Gotcha. Okay, so the transparency, all that stuff is you have to go into those modes. It's not like it senses somebody speaking around you and.
Well, yeah, you have to set it. You have to turn it on. Yeah, and gotcha. I can't remember what the defaults are in that configuration, but you just go into your settings through your phone in the app and find what you like.
Gotcha.
I'm pretty basic, I guess.
No. So yeah, let's switch gears and talk about the convention, kind of where we met.
Oh yeah.
Obviously we got one coming up soon, and it's going to be virtual. You've been to a few. What are I guess what are some of the most interesting sessions I guess you've seen at the conventions in terms of it could be research or coping mechanisms or whatever. Like, what kind of your favorite parts of the convention?
Actually, the research and everything and the presentations about the neurological studies, that's all very important. I'm very much for that. um, I really liked the presentation that Michael Menino gave at the last one, but I think, at least after having gone to three of these so far, I'm more about the misophonia experience myself. So for the first few, yeah, I was probably in just about every seminar, and some of them were interesting. And there were people that would come and talk about different things that they're trying. Like there's this guy, actually, I think in the Upper Midwest, Denver area or something, who was supposedly making some breakthrough research and did a presentation on his thing. And then there's Tom Dozier had some interesting ideas about it as well. You should look up the misophonia reflex. I believe he pioneered that term. But at the last convention, I noticed that I was spending more of my time hanging out outside but nearby with the other misophones, many of whom had probably seen a lot of those seminars themselves. And it was just to get together as a family once a year in a different location. That meant a lot to me. So I enjoyed that more. I'm not saying I don't go to any of the seminars. Of course I do. But I think that the experience is equally important to the educational aspect to this. I know that last time there was some talk about uh, trying CBD, and it's not something that I personally want to do, at least not at this point. But it was interesting to hear what they had to say about it. And one thing that I'm kind of looking forward to, and I guess we're going to maybe do it a little differently. I was hoping that we could focus on the regional support groups at the next convention. And now that it's gone virtual, there's probably still a way to do that. But this is the commercial here. I have a regional support group on Facebook that I do, and it's actually, this was originally the Misophonia Association's idea. I believe Dr. Johnson's idea, in fact. And Adil, of course, you do the Midwest, and I do the Western and Pacific region, and then our friend Ellen does the Northeast, and then I forget who does the Southeast. But kind of like to, through this podcast, make people aware that those groups are out there, as well as many non-regional groups. And hopefully we can maybe share some info on that and help people that need it get involved, through the next conference.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you got your Pacific one that's growing quite fast. It's kind of, I guess it's up and down the entire West Coast, right? So California up to Oregon, Washington, Alaska, and kind of
Yeah,
maybe neighboring states too.
Hawaii.
Yeah. Oh, Hawaii, of course. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, I think, and to be honest with you, Adil, I think you and I are going to have some of the same members. I mean, they are regional, but I learned when I was researching to set mine up that apparently the borders have never actually been officially set by the U.S. government as to what is Southwest and Midwest and Western and Eastern, et cetera. So a lot of people, when they, or organizations or what have you, when they needed to make regions, did it on their own. For example, I've always thought as Denver as being Midwest, and there are others who think that too, from what I read, but it's also considered Western. So if someone from that area wants to join my page, that won't necessarily exclude them. There's been plenty that I've sent toward you or Ellen, because for some reason a lot of people from Florida wanted to join my page. And thank you, Florida, love you. Just it's regional though, but I would refer them elsewhere also, because I want them to have some kind of support.
Yeah.
I think
So
there's a need for. Go ahead.
yeah, so I was gonna say, I mean, there are the big groups that just have like thousands of people from all over the place, just kind of like ranting and throwing uh, all their, you know, issues that they're dealing with. Well, what do you think are some? What do you kind of maybe kind of your goals for the regional your regional group, and kind of what are you seeing that it offers uh, people that they can't get anywhere else?
My attitude. I tend to it's still growing. So the members are always invited to post something. I'm not going to lie and say I might never have to take anything down, but feel free to try stay within the rules if you're a member of the group, and post what you want. If you want to post that got a vent, then by all means vent. Just do it appropriately. If you need to swear a little in the venting, it's okay. Just don't go crazy with it. If you want to post an article you read in on the Misophonia International page, I'm good with that because I'm doing a lot of those same posts myself. But I also really am into humor, in case you can't tell, and so I tend to post some funny things up there. Oftentimes directly related to misophonia, sometimes related because I just felt like relating it, and occasionally something that's not really related. I felt like maybe you guys needed a laugh today, so here's this funny meme from Facebook or whatever. So it doesn't have to be that tight. Get what you need out of it. Get a little venting out if you need to. Help someone else who's venting. There's been some of that. The group is starting to talk and post more, but at this point, it's still mainly me doing it. But these are the things I'm doing. Occasionally, I vent too. Post that article. I went crazy last week, and I think I posted about 8 hours worth of stuff one day. Must have been a lot of coffee that day. You want to post a joke? That's fine. I mean, I found a really good meme of Captain Picard from Star Trek: The Next Generation as Locutus the Borg, for all of you Star Trek nerds out there, reacting to a mesophone trigger. And that's not even what it was for, but I saw it and I'm like, yeah, that's a mesophone trigger reaction there. I put it up. So it's just get what you need to get through it, I guess. And a lot of that to me is humor. Not all of it, but a lot of it.
And have you, another thing we do is I do. You might do it more than I do. I just haven't had time because of my time zone. But we have the weekly, and there's a couple of them now. The weekly calls on Zoom, and a lot of people probably think about video calls and they're like, "Oh my God, that could be a disaster." But they've been quite cathartic and therapeutic, wouldn't you say? And people keep coming back to them. What do you think about? Have you been going to a bunch of those? I mean, logging into a bunch of those, or?
Well, if I could name drop another misophonia celebrity, Lyle, Cyberson.
Yes, Lyle was one of our early. Lyle was one of our early episodes. Lyle was honestly, actually, really one of the inspirations for this podcast. The meet and greet the night before the last convention is when I had this idea after maybe a few beverages. But he was one of the stories I really wanted to get on. Amazing human being, and I just kind of sorry I derailed the conversation talking about Lyle, but please continue.
Yeah. No, actually, all of your podcasts are good a deal, but that's one of my favorites. And I'll admit some of that's personal bias, probably because I'm friends with Lyle. But he introduced me to and he does have an amazing story. I don't want to downgrade his story. In fact, I've listened to it a few times, but he's the one that turned me onto the first Zoom group. And it took me a while to actually make the time to get in there. But once I got in there, it's very hard for me to skip, and it happens every other week. And that's I don't know if I'm allowed to say who runs that one publicly. But then there's the other group that kind of branched off from that, and that one is run by our friend Ellen, and I don't think that's a secret. And so I kind of joined up with that one too. And so one is on a Saturday, and then the other one is on a Sunday opposite that Saturday.
Yeah.
Every other week, a week apart from each other. And I try to go sign on to all of them. Sometimes it's just me and one other person, and sometimes I think the highest number I've seen is maybe 8 people.
Yeah, I remember last year on the holidays when I had time to go to some of them. There were like 10 people sometimes.
10.
Sometimes people would go in and out. But have you tried to do? I was going to ask you, how did your you tried to do a Facebook rooms? I think with your Pacific group. Did you get anybody? I haven't tried.
No. That yet. And how that works out, maybe we'll all know by the time this podcast airs.
Yeah.
I saw that function on there. My first thing was I didn't want to step on the Zoom groups. I tend to still stay in those groups. So I'm not sure how I want to go about it exactly. And I thought, well, maybe I could just do random groups and see how, what happens if you just open up a room and people haven't been signed on and see it. Will they show up? We'll see. And then, of course, scheduled groups are an option too. I'd obviously not schedule them at the same time as the Zoom groups. And so I thought, well, let's do a random test. So I gave everyone like 15 minutes notice. I posted, hey, I'm going to set up our first Facebook group room, or whatever you call it. And it's going to come on at like 5 o'clock or something. It was just this past weekend. Um, and so that time hit and I'm setting up the room and I managed to botch it. So then I'm posting, hey, keep watching. I'm
Yeah.
going to try this again in a few minutes. I think I had to do something like that 2 or 3 times before I finally got in there. And I said, okay. So here I am. And it was just before 6 o'clock at that point. And I said, I'm going to let this run till, so, or maybe it's just 5 and I was going to, whatever it was, I was going to give it about an hour. And I said, I'm just going to sit here and see who comes in. And no one came. And so I, shed a few tears and no, I'm just kidding. So then I got on there and I assured people in my next post, I said, hey, none of you showed up. It's cool. This is exactly the kind of data I'm looking for. I'm going to do a few more of these random ones and also some scheduled ones just to see if you guys show up so that I can determine if it benefits the group or not. And I'm hoping it does. But if it doesn't, then I'll abandon it. Not to say it won't benefit the group, but maybe now's not the time. I'm hoping it is. So I figure maybe after about 5 or 6 total trials between the 2 different methods, we'll see. And if it looks like it's going to work out, then I'll keep it on going one way or another. If it's not, then I'll just maybe try it again in a year or something. Weren't you going to do one too? I thought I saw something.
I was probably going to do one. I was going to maybe do one this week, and then yeah, there's been quite a few distractions around the country, so I've been
That's true. It could be bad timing.
Everyone's a little bit preoccupied.
That's true. But you know what? As an admin for those groups, you can see if people have even seen your post. And I think the last time I checked, about 14 people did see that room was there.
Yeah. Well, that's even if they're. I mean, they could be looking for. They could be looking for somebody posting, a neighbor posting whether people are burning down their house or something. So and they just happen to pass by your post. Yeah. So.
Right.
Hey, so look, John, Dr. John, I'll cut out the Dr. John's. It's not getting funny anymore.
Please send donations too.
We've cut a bunch of. Is there anything else you want to say to people? I know you're quite the advocate. So, anything you want to tell people maybe who are not quite as have not known about it as this long, are not quite as in tune to the community about MISO and maybe how they can get involved. Or what how they should cope or whatever we want to say.
Well, just a few things. One, if you are looking for a group, my group might not be your group. That's for you to decide. Maybe it is, okay. And if you happen to be in the Western region, or at least as best as we can define the Western region, Alaska or Hawaii, look for the group. It's called I forgot the name of my own group. The Western and Pacific.
Yeah.
It's a long one. Western and Pacific Misophonia Support Group. It's a Facebook group only, at least at this point. So you got to be a member of Facebook. And there's rules that you can read out front. If you look, you might actually run across what I call a preview page for non-members first with links to that one. It's a long story how I kind of built that one by accident, but it seems to have worked out. And then you send your join request and it gets reviewed. There's a few questions you have to answer. Those questions have to be answered one way or another for you to be considered, though. And they're basically, do you or a loved one have misophonia?
What's your social security number?
Right. Please include a credit card that doesn't expire for at least 6 months. So that you live in the right region and that you'll follow rules. I mean, standard stuff, really. But just do it. I mean, it's not that hard to get in if you meet the criteria, and it's not really that stringent of a criteria. But that said, I do want to bring up one other thing, if I may. I know there's a few of you out there who are offended by the idea of regional groups. You think it's elitist. I've gotten a few unhappy emails, okay? And I accept that. One person basically flat out, she was very nice about it, but she told me she didn't agree with the idea of regional groups because she felt it excluded people. I can see where that's coming from. I make no apologies for having a regional group. I do believe in them. But I also believe in non-regional groups with other focus and groups that maybe just don't have as much focus. And there's a lot of them out there. So
exactly, this is just another tool, and it could be used to meet up in person, where it's less likely to
exactly
have a big group. So Yeah.
Exactly. And one of the people who doesn't like this idea is actually local to me, but that's a whole nother story.
Yeah.
Um, but that said, and hopefully this will all be in fruition by the time this podcast airs. I'm actually working on another group right now that is non-regional. Um, it has a slightly different focus, very similar, and I'm not getting rid of my regional group. Okay, I say my group, but I look at it as our group. That it belongs to the people in it, not just me. I just happen to be the guy pulling the trigger on some of the things. But I am putting together a room with a wider range for the planet, where maybe there can be more talking. And you say, well, there's groups out there already doing it. Well, of course there are, and I'm not trying to compete with them. I just think we need more of them. That's part of the awareness. And some of them are going to come to my group, and some of them are going to go to the other similar group, or 10 of the same, and that's fine. Whatever works. We're not competing with each other. We're here to support each other, and that's what I want to do. So, as we say in LA, the working title of my group is Misophonia Without Borders. And that probably will be the final title of it when I'm done with it. I've been putting it together for the last week. But Misophonia Without Borders. Keep an eye out. Maybe we'll see you there.
Well, that's great. Misophonia Without Borders. Let's end on that note, and we'll definitely plug that if that's ready by the time we air. And John, I want to thank you. I can't wait to see you again. I see you here on video, but
right.
Maybe at the next in-person convention, or at some other event when we can all travel. But always good to talk to you. And thanks for all you're doing for spreading awareness and starting groups and just trying to get people together to figure this out.
Well, thank you too, man. I love what you do with your podcast. Now that we're not recording, I'm going to tell you something honestly. So take it as the compliment that it is. The first time I met you, I think, was as I was getting ready to leave for the airport in Minneapolis, or as the convention ended or something. So I know we didn't talk that much the first time. And then last time in Denver, we spent a little more time together, and everybody's getting inspired, and you were inspired. And I remember you go, I'm going to start a Misophonia podcast when I get back. And I'm like, that sounds great, but we'll see if he actually does it or not. And you have... Well, no, I didn't say you weren't going to do it, but I know how the inspiration can fade. And I thought, let's just see what he does. Maybe in 6 months I'll hear something. You have this damn thing up running in 2 weeks. I was like, I don't think I've ever been so impressed by that kind of motivation. That was awesome.
Yeah, well,
and I have shared that with others. It's the first time I've got to tell you that myself face to face, sort of.
Yeah. No, I mean, I wanted to feed off the energy that I got from you guys, that we all kind of built together. So, it's a good little group we have there. Okay, I'm looking forward to all of us all hanging out again. Thank you, John, and thanks everyone for listening. It's good to be back with new interviews. They'll continue next Wednesday. Still slots available if you want to have a conversation. I would love to chat. Go to misophoniapodcast.com. You can sign up for a slot right there. Music again is by Moby. And until next week, wishing you peace and quiet.